Hey Ravens, welcome to Tarot Tuesday. Today is the 10th of December, 2019. We are getting so close to the end of the decade. Um, Brief little revelation I want to share with y'all. Found out that after all this time, I was right the first time. Capricorn and not Aquarius is my rising sign. Interestingly enough, the grand conjunction between Saturn and Pluto and also Jupiter, I think, that's coming next year happens to be right on the degree of my ascendant. So that'll be fun. Um, um, but yeah, so anyway, before I get to the reading proper, and now that I'm done talking about my problems, just a brief reminder that if you want a personalized reading, you'd like your own birth chart done, etc., etc., you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, Patreon. Uh, Strongly recommend the Patreon to you. You can get your own monthly personalized horoscope. Um, Lots of other good stuff. Exclusive readings I don't give to anybody but folks on Patreon. Speaking of which, Patreon folks, keep your eyes open. One is on its way to you soon. But in the meantime, we're going to talk about this week's aspect, which occurs tomorrow, but it's big. Um, because for the only time, I phrased that poorly, but in its like 18-ish month circle around the horoscope, Venus is going to be making contact with Saturn. Direct contact. It's a conjunction. So Venus, the Empress, and Saturn, the world, in Capricorn, the devil. And when you take the cards individually, this is sort of interesting. The Empress, after all, representing sort of what's traditionally thought of as feminine, creative energy or mastery of same. But of the thing which is transformative and generative. You know, the Empress is a kind of creativity that takes something and turns it into something else. You have this in the sign of Capricorn, which is represented by the devil, the sign of restrictions and limitations, things need to be broken free from. And connecting all of this is Saturn, which rules Capricorn and is represented, that was upside down, sorry, represented by the world. So we have a coming full circle of, at once, both a limitation that needs to be broken free of and a kind of transmutation, a creative transmutation of energy. And so with the presence of Saturn, I definitely the very strong feeling of something that's being worked, that is being or has been worked at. Lots of labor went into whatever this wall is that you've been hitting, that you're now finally managing to get over. It is more than get over. It would be more like running up against the wall and then deciding to put three more up and build your house there. Um, it's a little less about what the obstacle is that's before you, and what you're doing to not to hurdle it or to get over it or to break through it, but to transform it into something that is beneficial to you, something that is good for you, something that will help you grow. Which is, after all, what the Empress is all about. Mastery of... And so with Saturn there, this is a lesson to be learned also. We are learning from this aspect how to transform something that we thought was a barricade into a building block. It's a pretty it's a pretty big aspect. Venus is going to be here for a little while. It's also going to, by default, make contact with Pluto, which brings in the whole notion of judgment. But it won't do that until Friday the 13th. So we're not just talking at that point about changing an obstacle into an asset, but then looking back at the obstacle and seeing how, not only how you could have done differently in the past, but what it opens you up to do differently in the future. So lots of perspective shifting this week, Ravens. Lots of again, much like the Neptunian aspects we've been seeing over the last couple weeks, lots of changing. Instead of who you are, the way or your perspective on things, this is definitely like changing how you use your experience, not just the method of acquiring experience, but how you're using it now is what's changing. Almost as though a shift in perspective has given you new tools with which to perceive. So let's find out what's in your cards for the week. Beginning with Sagittarius. The Six of Pentacles. The card of giving and of plenty. I do not mean, Sagittarius, for this read to sound as selfish as it will. But you have been probably unfairly limiting the ways in which, or you've been unfairly to yourself. You've been limiting the ways in which you give. There is something that there may even, in fact, it may even be that there is something that you don't perceive as something that you have to give that in fact is a gift you can give. One of the other reads for this card can be stinginess, and some of that is coming through, but only in hindsight. Again, this is going to be a lot of, hindsight being 2020, especially when Venus contacts Pluto later in the week. Right on Friday the 13th, like I said, which should be a very interesting day with that aspect. But I digress. The thing about a gift, Sagittarius, is that its value is assigned by the receiver rather than the giver. Like, you can put whatever value on that gift you want. The recipient of that gift is going to put their value on it. And because they're the ones with it in their hands, literally or metaphorically, theirs is going to be sort of the default value of the gift, for better or for worse, for right or for wrong. Just because you don't think it's worth anything to give does not mean that anyone else agrees with you. And you might find that quite a lot of people actually do disagree. For Capricorn, in whose sign all this is going down, we have the Magician. All the tools are yours. With the Magician, all the tools are yours. And which makes sense. All of this is happening in your sun sign, Capricorn. You are uniquely positioned to make use of this energy, especially because Saturn, your ruler, is one of the planets being aspected. we're all going to have to make the most of these aspects, but you're in a position, Capricorn, to make more of it than anyone else can. But that also means recognizing what the tools you have at hand are. You have to recognize them as such. That's part of what this, excuse me, this week's energies are going to teach you. So focus on that. Focus on what you have, and then really work on bringing it to bear. For Aquarius, we have the Lovers. Your great obstacle, Aquarius, has not been a what but a who. And in a lot of ways, that makes this probably the most difficult. When obstacles are people rather than things or events or emotions. But this is not somebody you have to be fighting against. This is someone that you could partner with. You have just been considering this from the wrong angle. You have been not allowing yourself to see a fuller picture. And this will gradually come to light for you, hopefully. But you can work together with this person that up to now you've believed you were working at cross purposes to. It is possible for you to harmonize with them. I do get the feeling that this is very temporary. Whatever sort of alliance you forge is very definitely one of convenience, and it also feels like that's to the good of everybody involved. But this is a hatchet that you can bury for the sake of eventually allowing to rust. You're keeping it sharp through use, and it's not something that either needs to be sharp or be used. For Pisces, we have Justice. And all of the, concepts pertaining there to freedom, fairness, equality, being even-handed. What's fair to you, Pisces? And I don't mean that in a weird philosophical way where I'm asking you to define fairness. What I mean is, what is it fair for you to want, have, and take? If you're honest with yourself. Unflinchingly, brutally, painfully honest with yourself. This is what you need to do this week, Pisces. You need to be fair to Pisces, not everybody else. You cannot calm everyone else's internal sea if your own is turbulent. Now, granted, you are mutable water, so I know how difficult that must sound to you, and I'm very aware that much of the advice that I give is a whole lot easier said than done, but I stand by it. Find out what's fair to you. Pursue it. Or learn a harsh lesson at the hands of Venus and Capricorn. For Aries, we have the Tower. And you probably saw the foreboding dawn on me as I drew this. I make no secret of the fact that I'm an Aries sun sign, and I am very leery of what this card portends. No card in the tarot scares me quite as much as the Tower, if I'm honest with you, because the Tower is Earth. It's world shaking change. It's complete upheaval. In much the same way as Aquarius faces a unique challenge in having their obstacle be a whom rather than a what, you too, Aries, will also be facing a difficult period as you try to pivot this obstacle into something useful because of the nature of the obstacle itself, the degree to which this thing has been a burden for you to carry and something that you would much prefer to leave behind you. You have to pivot and take it up. Lots of things are going to be shifting as a result of what it is that you have to do, Aries, and it's going to be uncomfortable. That's really unavoidable here. Um, Again, like I say, the Tower is one of those cards that it's ominous. It's a herald of something great in the sense that it's large. You may wish to batten down the hatches this week, Aries. I know that I am going to. For Taurus, the Ten of Cups. A great card. Couldn't be more of a sea change from the previous. The Ten of Cups is the card of just it's peace everlasting. Um, it's joy on a grand scale. And like I say, it could not more totally be the opposite of what Aries is going to go through this week. Um, it's not wish fulfillment in the sense that the Nine of Cups is, but it is. This is very much the and all was right with the world and they lived happily ever after card. This is um, quite potent, but that's to be expected given that this is in your cousin Cap. These aspects are in your cousin Capricorn sign, but Venus is your ruler. So again, no surprise that these aspects would be particularly good to you. Um, this is more of a results card than a process card. Like irrespective of what you do with the energy, whatever you do comes out great. Um, so just don't necessarily put your feet up and relax, but trust the process. This goes somewhere really, really great for you. Oh, excuse me. For Gemini, we have the Mother of Swords. Very judgmental eyes on that owl. Um, this is a person this time. If you've watched enough of these, you know that I tend to interpret the court cards as uh, personified forms of energy, but this is different for you, Gemini. I very strongly read a person into this. Not necessarily your mother, but definitely a powerful female figure in your life. One who's very determined. And I mean that in the way of being like set in advance. Um, this is someone who's already made up their mind about lots of things, and to change it is difficult. Um, this is a person, Gemini, that you'll have run up against before. Um, but and again, how isn't clear to me so much as that you're dealing with this person. But this person is that pivot. Something about the relationship to this woman is the pivot for you. Um, and your relationship with them is the thing that shifts. Um, it's not so directly antagonistic as again your cousin Aquarius and the lovers, but this definitely is someone that you've always sort of kind of felt was looking down at you, like over their nose. Um, Again, like I say, very judgmental. Lots of, like, more so than usual, judgment radiates from the eyes of that owl in this card for me, and that's the thing I'm picking up on. Is this is someone who you tend to think of as very judgmental. Um, Open yourself to the possibility of being wrong, and see what happens. For Cancer, we have the Daughter of Pentacles. Cute little deer under a rainbow. It's Bambi. You drew the Bambi card. Look to the youth around you, Cancer. Maybe you have a child. Doesn't necessarily have to be a daughter, but or like niece, nephew, very small cousin if you're the right age. Um, or your generation is wide enough. I can speak to that. Mine kind of is. My youngest cousins are like 4 years old. I'm almost 30. Uh, but look to the youth around you and try to adopt some of that naivety and that sort of fresh-eyed way of uh, looking at things. Again, we're back to the court cards being more of an energetic archetype than an actual living one. But yeah, sort of, like embody that kind of child sense of childlike wonder. Find it somewhere. It is the lens which allows you to make the pivot. It will be this different way of looking at the world. Maybe this is the thing you were meant to learn from Neptune all along. Is just to let go of, the adult senses of mechanical curiosity, or at best, or at worst, outright cynicism. Dig deep, find the inner child, and then love on it a little bit. Let it play. See what that shows you. For Leo, the world returns. And for you, Leo, this to me this reads as much of coming full circle as coming out of a shell no one, least of all you, thought you still possessed. Um, the better analog might be the stage 2 rocket of space flight. If you're not already familiar, rockets that leave Earth's atmosphere to travel to the space station or parts beyond have two stages. There's the initial stage which gets it off the ground, and the second stage which propels it into, the upper levels of the stratosphere and out into what we think of as outer space, versus what I believe scientists do actually refer to as inner space, which is a small window between the habitable atmosphere and the vacuum of space. Um, this is your stage 2 rocket. Something about this week is your stage 2 rocket. Making this pivot propels you into even more eunice, if that makes sense. For Virgo, we have the Nine of Pentacles. For a sign that fairly or otherwise is often described as fastidious, um, or put another way, stubborn and like for well known for wanting to have it their way or the highway. Whether that's fair or not, and in many cases it's not. The Nine of Pentacles in conjunction with this reading, just the only feeling I get from it, the energy that I'm drawing on it is just going the way you don't want to go to get to where you want to be. Everything will turn out the way you want it, but you can't do it the way you want to. You have to see things from a perspective outside of your own in order to get what you want. I can't render it any plainer than that. That's probably going to hurt some of your feelings. I'm very sorry. Look, I just do what the cards tell me. That's really all that it is. But again, like I say, this is all about that pivot to making an obstacle an asset. And if your obstacle is that you have to do something in a way you would prefer not to, this is your sign that getting it done the way it needs to get done rather than the way you want to do it is the right way. Or at least is the way to you getting the thing that you want out of it. And in the end, aren't those really the same thing? For Libra, we have the Daughter of Swords. The feeling I get from this card is one of I will use this when I am ready. Libra, what you're getting out of this, at least as far as I can make out the sort of feeling I'm getting from it, the vibration that's coming off of this, is that you're perhaps alone. We'll have to see what Scorpio's read is in a second, but perhaps alone of all the other zodiac signs, you're not taking something up as an immediately useful tool. This is something that's going into your toolbox, into your war chest. This is something that you're going to, whatever this thing is, the obstacle that you're pivoting into something useful is being made useful for later. You're both pivoting the obstacle itself and your orientation to it at the same time. This very much feels like I'll come back to this when I need it kind of thing. And I'm going to have to leave it there, which is incredibly cryptic of me. But yeah, whatever this is, it isn't for now, it's for later. Although I get the feeling it's probably not going to be much later. There is that grand conjunction right around the corner. Last but most certainly not least is Scorpio. and we have the Nine of Swords. The it's I don't think there's any version of the Nine of Swords I've ever seen that so accurately depicts the energy to it for me as this does. This is beautiful in a very, very grotesque way, um, which is also what the Nine of Swords is. Um, it's nightmares. It's supposed to be horrifying. Like the original depiction, it's wake up in the middle of the night sobbing. Um, Now, granted, I'm not telling you that this is going to be a horrible aspect for you. Actually, what I gather is that something that you thought, like you're going to have to revisit your orientation to outcomes because what your idea of the worst possible outcome is wrong. Now, I might be interpreting that incorrectly because the other feeling I get is that that you're going to learn how wrong it is, which in and of itself is horrifying or can be. Um, but your worst case scenario, your idea of the worst case scenario, Scorpio, is not actually the worst case scenario. You could have it much, much worse than you do. And whether Saturn is going to be a strict teacher about that or not is kind of up for the rest of the week to determine. But you have quite a bit to experience, Scorpio. So, that is Tarot Tuesday for this week. I hope that it was enlightening for you. I can't ask you to enjoy it, especially not some of you. That was kind of brutal. But like I said, if you want more questions answered, more work done, you know where to find me, and I'll see you guys next week.